49 years ago in 1951, Buddy Krebs drove in his very first ever stock car race. It was a show at Cherry Park Speedway. In 1974, he drove in his final race. In the 33 years of active competition in between, he won the most prestigious stock car races in this part of the country. He also drove sprint cars, super modifieds, and cars that were pretty much the counterpart to today's Winston Cup. More importantly, I think, however, than the wins he had was the way he went about his racing, because Buddy Krebs did it with style, and he did it with class, at a time when racers had reputations as bad as the worst and most evil Dennis Rodman athletes of any time in this country's history. But Buddy Krebs' ready smile, his affection for people, combined with the courage to come back from life-threatening injury to drive and win again, Buddy Krebs was one of the good guys. During Buddy Krebs' time, the top event here in New England was the 500 at Riverside Park. Team cars, one driver in his car went out and ran about as long as the car was still fast, or he was about to run out of gas, and then that driver would bring his car in and tap the back bumper of his teammate. Off the teammate would go. 500 laps around that tiny fifth-mile racetrack. And all season long, Tom Gallen, the announcer, would tout who is going to team with who, because the big question was who's going to team up with the biggest drivers at Riverside Park, because the team was what won the 500. And in 1952, Buddy Krebs was a rookie. And who did he want to team with? He wanted to team with the same guy everybody else wanted to team with, the guy who was the best driver, the guy who had the fastest car, and that was Giacomo Giacomo. And in 1952, much to Krebs' surprise, Giacomo agreed to team with him in the 500, showing the youngster uncommon respect. And together they won that 1952 Riverside 500. Buddy Krebs won it again in 1953, this time teamed with Benny Germano. In 54, he won teamed with Ed Flemke. In 60, teamed with Gene Bergen. In 63, teamed with Ed Patnode. In 67, teamed with Jerry Humiston. And then there was 68, when he sort of won it with Billy Greco, and would have if the gas tank in Greco's car wasn't just about a half a gallon too big. There were other races. Over 200 feature wins are reported in the 15 scrapbooks his wife Sybil has kept over all of these years. Wins at Stafford, Thompson, Westboro, Plainville, Millers Falls, Keene, West Haven, Eastern States. He about owned the Eastern States races. Bridgeport, Cherry Park, Arlington, New York, Lebanon Valley, New York, Middletown, Morristown, and some other dusty dirt tracks and dangerous asphalt ovals in between. He was a Stafford champion, he was a Thompson champion, and 3 times a champion at Riverside Park Speedway. Now, there's some great stories to be told about Buddy Krebs, and I was fortunate to have been there to have seen at least some of them unfold. At some point in the 1950s, Thompson Speedway ran sprint cars against the stock cars, and at the time Buddy Krebs owned a sprint car that he built himself, the Crown 7, and oh, how Gene Bergen wanted to drive that car. And so, against good judgment, against all odds, Buddy Krebs let Gene Bergen drive his Crown 7 while Buddy started up in the front of the field in a stock car. You see, fair is fair, so they started the stock cars up front. And they dropped the green flag on the race, and off they went, and Buddy Krebs is leading the race, but in the final laps, he could smell somebody on his back bumper, and he knew damn well who it was and what car Gene Bergen was in at the time. And try as he might, Buddy Krebs couldn't keep Gene Bergen behind him, and in the final laps, as Bergen went by, one hand on the wheel, Gene Bergen waved bye-bye. That is probably the most infuriated Buddy Krebs has ever been in his entire racing career. Besides the win and the funds, Buddy Krebs authored some truly memorable and spectacular crashes, one of which occurred on the sands at Daytona Beach, Florida, in Mal Barlow's Red Ram Dodge. Over and over and over he went, and some photographer somewhere got black and whites that appeared in just about every newspaper in the country and a lot of magazines as well. And Buddy Krebs looked at the car owner and said, "Geez, Mal, I'm sorry I destroyed your car." And Barlow said, "Don't worry about it, we'll get another." Little did they know that a few days later, a brand new Red Ram Dodge showed up in Barlow's lot, provided by Chrysler Corporation, who was so pleased to have seen the publicity, any publicity is good, that they showed up with a brand new red Ram. And then there was the night at Riverside Park, where I was in the grandstands for this one, with the red Ram Dodge, and the crash ended. And here's Buddy Krebs' car, absolutely vertically hanging from the backstretch chain link fence. And he didn't get out of the car. And the reason he didn't get out of the car was it was just barely hanging up there. And Krebs was afraid to move in the car for fear if he did in any direction, the car was going to topple over. And I remember everybody standing around watching, trying to figure out how to do it. And finally they did prop the car up, and Buddy Krebs jumped out of the car. And of course the grandstands erupted, as they always did. Anytime they could see Buddy Krebs, everybody applauded. And there was a wild one night at Menands, New York, where in Skip Madsek's Crown 7 stock car, the throttle stuck, and he went off the backstretch, end over end, side over side. What a mess. There was virtually nothing left of that race car when the accident happened. And Krebs crawled from the car, and they brought him to the local hospital, where they laid him out. His leg had internal bleeding, and he wasn't in very good shape at all. And the doctor came in and took a look at him and said, "Fellow, what happened to you?" And he said, "I'm a race car driver, and I just got into a crash." Doctor said, "One of those, huh?" Turned, walked, and left the emergency room. Buddy said, "I know where I wasn't wanted," persuaded his crew to lift him up. They put him in the back of a station wagon, took him to Connecticut, where they could find a more friendly doctor to take care of his injuries. The worst one, the one that almost ended not only his career but his life, happened in Langhorne, Pennsylvania in October 1960 in the Race of Champions. That was a time before door bars, and somehow or another Buddy got turned in one of those big crashes, and somebody nailed him solid in the door, right on the driver's side. He was hit so hard that the crash tore all the ligaments out of his heart, broke all of his ribs on the left side, and he nearly lost his life. 1960 was the year I graduated from high school, and at the time I was a huge Buddy Krebs fan, and I could remember seeing the television pictures a month or so later, and here's Buddy Krebs with a cane, and oh, he was beat up, and he was telling the announcer that he would be back, he'd race again. And I thought to myself, no way a guy that's hurt as bad as that could ever come back and race again. But I underestimated how tough and how brave Buddy Krebs was, because when the first green flag dropped in 1961, Buddy Krebs was behind the wheel of a race car again. And indeed, some of his best moments in auto racing happened after that crash. He was tougher than I thought, tougher than his competitors thought too. Today, Buddy Krebs works part-time, hustling cars, and just like always, he's still driving his wife, Sybil, nuts. If you ask him, he'll tell you that 33 years of racing brought him a lot of memories. If you ask his fans, and I'm one, we could all tell you about memories of Buddy Krebs driving Jimmy Jorgensen's VOs, or the Suffield Auto Center number 5, or the Crown 7, or Bobby Oliver's 10 pins, and doing it with such style and such class. Gosh, he was fun to cheer for. In his day, Buddy Krebs was the man of the hour. He's a hero who gave stock car racing all but his very life. Buddy Krebs, you belong in this Hall of Fame. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Dick. That was really good, thank you. He said it just like I wrote it. Dick and I have been friends an awful long time. I'm going to tell you, I want to thank each and every one of you folks today. I said I wasn't going to do this, so here I am up here doing it. But I just want to say that my wife, Sybil, has been my strength all the way through my racing career. And I love you very much. Thank you. My daughter's here, Robbie, and my grandson and my granddaughter, and all my friends here, the people I drove race cars for throughout the year, Dexter and Jimmy and Neil, all the guys here. Thanks for coming down, guys. Years ago, in my heyday, excuse me, in my heyday, we were invited up to Channel 22. They wanted to interview me. as one of the race drivers. And I brought Sybil and my daughter Robin up. Robin was a little girl around 8 years old. They took us into the station and they interviewed me, asked me the questions about racing. I gave them the answers, and then they interviewed my wife. She gave them the answers, and then they looked down at my daughter. She was about, just like I said, around 8 years old. He said, "Robin, we know who your favorite race driver is, right?" She said, "Yeah." So he walks over and says, "Who was your favorite race driver?" She looked at him and says, "Billy Greco." So I'm looking at what the hell's going on here, you know? Looking at my wife, and then I said, what is this? She said, "My dad's a good driver too, though." You know? I said, "Oh, excuse me." I said, "Oh, Robbie's." That was a long walk home from Springfield to Connecticut, wasn't it? A long walk. So we had a lot of good years in racing, and I'll tell you, they asked me, did anything happen that I can remember? And I thought, geez, I'm running Riverside Park at 5th and Mile track. You go 25 laps, everything is exciting down there, believe me. To get up to the front, you had to more or less bull your way through. And I think everybody here that was at Riverside knows what I'm talking about. And they said, "Well, what really happened that excited you the most?" And I'll tell you a quick story. I was, oh God, years and years ago, the late and great Eddie Patno and I were always friends off the track. We had bumpers and we nudged each other, so on and so forth, like everybody did. One night we had a 100-lap race. I was fortunate enough to take over the lead. Thanks to this guy down here, our handicapper, you always started so far back you couldn't even see the front cars. But I was lucky enough to take over the lead. For some reason, Ed Patno, he was a giant of a man. I think you guys know that, who knew Eddie. And he wasn't running good or not handling good, one or the other or both, but I was catching him to put a lap on him. And I seen him, and I pulled alongside him to put a lap on him, and that man would not let me through. I tried and tried as I may. Finally, with about 5 or 6 laps to go, he put me into the cinders. Instead of winning the race, I came in 4th. And I was furious. My temperature gauge was not on my car, on me, was over to the end. I parked that race car in the pit. He was down the other end of it. I ran over to him. I was like, I'm big now. I was like 150 pounds. Eddie was a giant. I ran up to that car, and I smacked him hard as my body would let me. And he fell like a rock. Leo Matty, I don't know how many people remember Leo. He's standing there, he's got a cigar in his mouth, and he put his arm around me. He said, "Buddy, listen to me." He said, "If I were you, I would turn around and run back to my race car as fast as my legs will carry me." He says, "Because when he gets up, he's going to kill you." I looked at Leo Matty, I looked down at Eddie Patno, and I turned around and I ran back to my race car as fast as my legs would carry me. And my guys were waiting there. They had all the usual Riverside wrenches, the pipe wrenches, and the lug wrenches, so on and so forth. And I figured, he is going to kill me. He is. And we waited for him to come, and he never came over. Not once. Now I'm figuring all that week, every time I crossed the street, I'd look both ways. And I'm serious. You know, the guy's going to get me. He's very patient, but he's going to get me. And we had 3 more races left, and we made contact. And one time I was on the outside of him, I got him in traffic, and I was between the 3rd and 4th turn at Riverside, and I thought then, he's going to put me up into the top bleacher of that roller coaster. I know I'm going to race it, but he never did. During that winter time, I was at Southern Auction Sales right down the road here. For you folks that don't know, that's where dealers buy and sell used cars. And I'm standing there, and I got my arms crossed. I'm looking at some cars to buy, and this guy comes and get a tap like that, and I turned around. There he was. I said, "Oh, God, please." He says, "You still mad at me, Krebs?" And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "I'm not mad at you." He said, "Put it there." And he put his hand out, and I put my hand out. And we shook hands. And he put his arms around me and embraced me. He says, "I'm sorry." And I said, "I'm sorry, too." And that has to be about the most exciting, because I was really, really, really broke up on that. I want to thank everybody here for this. Thank you.